Hey everybody, today I want to talk about temper tantrums, hulking out, as I say to my boys, like turning into the Hulk, that sort of thing. Hulking out, temper tantrums, complaining, aggro, angry, frustrated, abusive, loud, obnoxious behavior, that sort of thing. Centering all on the self, centering on the self. And what you're doing and what you're saying and what you've had to go through and what you've had to endure, instead of focusing on Yahushua, who is our be-all and end-all and everything. We live and breathe through him. So we need to focus on him, because today we're going to see, we've seen what Mushah's been through with these hideous people. Mushah hulks out. Mushah has a big hulk out, big temper tantrum at the rock. So let's go into it, because we'll see that that sort of behavior has detrimental results, And remember, Yahushua's the same. He feels the same yesterday, today, and forever. He hates certain behaviors and he loves other behaviors. So that's why we're dissecting these scriptures, to see, shine a light on behavior and see, how does Yahushua really want me to behave? He says this in his word, but what is that behavior? What is that today? So I'm not, because I don't want to be, it's not that I don't love him and want to obey anything he says to do. It's a matter of, I don't want to read it wrong. I don't want to understand it wrong and, represent him in a stupid way. Because it's not, when I've said many times, you're just behaving like an idiot. Who cares? And who cares how we are viewed? It's about him. We are misrepresenting him. And we're going to talk about that today as well. Misrepresenting Yahushua. Giving a false impression of how he is, how he feels, how he would behave. That sums up religion today. A religious behavior today, which is in every assembly and every movement that I've been in anyway. Religious behavior. We want to get rid of that, because it centers on the self instead of centering on Yahushua. Anyway, let's go into our next part. What was last week about? Last week was about the red heifer. So we talked about the red heifer, and now they've come to the wilderness of sin and camped at Kadesh. Mushah's tantrum at the rock. Mushah chucks a big temper tantrum. He hulks out. In the first month of the year, the whole community of Israel arrived in the wilderness of Zin and camped at Kadesh. Interesting about where we're going now is that we've jumped 40 years almost. In the turquoise here, it's been around 40 years now since Israel left Egypt. So the ground opened up, all the rebels fell in, this happened, that happened. We had Aaron's rod budding and all this sort of stuff. We've set out, we've proved who we are, what we're going to do. I've told you now, I've proved it. This is my priesthood. This is who's going to come near the tabernacle. This is who's not. All the rebels have been gotten rid of. Aaron's stick that budded is now in the ark as proof. Here, this is the most important sacrifice you're going to lift up, the red heifer. We've done that. And now they've been wandering in the wilderness for nearly 40 odd years, 38 years probably. So there's been a big time jump. So keep that in mind as we go on. It's been around 40 years since Israel left Egypt. So they're at camp at Kadesh. While they were there, Miriam died and was buried. Just like that. This is Mushah and Aaron's dear sister. Probably one of the most prominent women in the Torah, the first 5 books of the scripture, one of the most prominent females characters that we've read about, and it just says there, she died. That's it. No elaborate anything, Miriam's death is given just this very short sentence. And like most people mentioned in scripture, there's no big deal made about her death. And this is another way the scripture distinguishes itself from all other bodies of literature. For instead of all the different flavors and emphasis, pomp and ceremony and everything surrounding the deaths of prominent figures in Egyptian, Hittite, or Arabian records, Yahushua's word is all about life, not death. You never see much detail about death in the scriptures. It's just like he goes into so much painstaking detail about so many other things, and then he died. And he was buried. It's like, what, you couldn't tell us how it happened? You couldn't give us that bit? You've gone into 50 odd chapters about how to, measure this and measure, you couldn't tell us how he died? No, the scriptures aren't like that, And that's how it sets itself apart, most people say, from all the other historic literature. The works of the Egyptian, Hittites and Arabian records that are all going on about the death and the ceremonies and everything like that. Not the scriptures. The scriptures, Yahushua's word is all about life, not death. And not just our earthly life either, which is so short and temporary, but mainly our eternal life, because, as we've already stated, to Yahushua, there's nothing more abnormal, hideous, or abominable than death and the diseases that lead to death. He hates death, doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to know about it. In fact, when he came along, that was his main number one goal, to destroy death and its symptoms, everything that causes death. So that's just a short thing about Miriam. We don't know how she died, what happened, but she dead. Pushing up daisies now. And once again, here we go. And there was no water for the people to drink at that place. So Yisrael rose up against Mushah and Aaron, blaming them, saying, if only we had died at the tabernacle with our brothers all those years ago. I assume they're referring to the ground opening up and 50 odd thousand people dying. If only we died at the tabernacle with our brothers all those years ago. Why did you bring Yahuwah's people into this wilderness to die, along with all our livestock? In fact, why did you make us leave Egypt at all, bringing us here to this terrible place? This land has no grain, no figs, no grapes, no pomegranates, and once again, no damn water, man. There's no water to drink. So Mushah and Aaron turned away from the people, went to the entrance of the tabernacle, where they fell face down on the ground, obviously seeking a response from Yahushua. Then the magnificent presence of Yahushua appeared to them, saying, you and Aaron must take the stick and grab the entire community together, and as the people watch, speak to that rock over there, and water will pour out of it, and you'll be able to provide more than enough water to quench Israel's thirst, as well as all their livestock. What was the instruction Yahushua gave? Take the stick, grab the entire community together so they can see this happen, because it's about belief as well. Encouraging them, showing them, I'm still here, I'm still supernaturally providing for you. Like it's not obvious, it's been 40 odd years now. So take the stick, just as you raised it up over the waters in Egypt, raise the stick up and speak. Speak to the rock. And water will pour out of it, and you'll be able to provide more than enough water to quench Israel's thirst, as well as all their livestock. So Mushah did what he was told, taking the stick from the place where it was kept in the tabernacle. Then he and Aaron called out for the people to come and gather at the rock. Then he ripped them all a new one. He went off his face, hulked out, temper tantrum, big time. Listen here, you filthy pack of rebel scum, he shouted at them. Must we spoon feed you little bubbies water from this rock too? Must we? Who's he focusing on? Must we, Aaron and must we poor patsies have to look after you sniveling little shit all day, every day? And all your filthy lies and complaints? Listen here, you filthy pack of scum. Must we spoon feed you little bubbies water from this rock too? Then Mushah raised up his hand and bashed the living hell out of this rock. He bashed this rock twice with his stick. Gave it a good twice over. Yeah? Bashed the crap out of it. Twice. And water gushed out. So the entire community of Israel and all their livestock drank till their hearts were content. People were happy. Cattle, livestock, happy. Everybody happy. Except, guess who wasn't happy? I'm sure Mushah was probably happy too. He got to have a good drink. And Aaron, guess who wasn't happy though? Yahushua said to, is that what? Yeah. Yahushua said to Mushah, but Yahushua said to Mushah and Aaron, after everything you've seen me do, you couldn't even trust or believe me enough to set me apart to the people of Israel. You just couldn't set me apart to the people of Israel, could you? In other words, you centered everything on yourself instead of giving me the credit. So guess what? You won't be leading them into the land I'm giving them. And this place was known as the waters of ℧𝑚eribah, which is contention and quarreling, because the people of Israel argued with Yahushua there, so he demonstrated his set-apartness among them. So that might seem like a harsh, verdict given to Mushah, who's done all this stuff for the last 40, 50, 60, walking with Yahushua for nearly 100 years, so it might seem very harsh, but let's go into a little bit. Because we give ourselves these rights, don't we? We put up with things to a certain point and then we just go off our face. We have the right. I'm the husband, I'm the wife, I'm the breadwinner, I'm the boss, I'm the this, I'm the that. I've been putting up with your crap and I'm letting you know now. And we hulk out and we have a big pity party and complain and whinge, bitch and everything, So we give ourselves these rights that Mushah gave himself, instead of just speaking gently to the rock and drawing the attention to what Yahushua was going to do, so that people could see that it was Yahushua doing it. He had to get in the way and say, look what we are. Do we still have to feed you, drink, spoon feed you? We. Then he bashed the rock to show that he was doing it. He fed up with you. So, not very nice behavior. Mushah set out to do what was instructed, but ended up giving the unruly crowd a real piece of his mind, before taking his walking stick and bashing the crap out of this huge rock twice. Water immediately began gushing out of the crevice of the boulder in huge volumes, and it must have been a hell of a lot of water, because it had to be enough to quench the thirst of about 3 million people and their animals. Remember back in Exodus, I think it was, we talked about how much water they would have needed? Probably about an Olympic pool, 50-meter Olympic pool per day, for about 3 million people, and their animals. So a lot of water. So the fact that they've been wandering around for 40 odd years, and many scholars and sages and stuff have said that was probably one of the most phenomenal thing ever done in human history by Yahushua, sustaining and supernaturally providing for nearly 3 million people for 40 years. Where'd they get new clothes from? They could trade here and there, but he supernaturally provided for them food and drink, the quails, the manna, the water, anything else that came across their path in that 40 years, It's one of the most miraculous things that he's ever done. We can say, he fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Yeah, well, that was 5,000. This was nearly 3 million every day for 40 odd years. So amazing, isn't it? Yisrael is happy, but Yahushua is not. And he tells Mushah and Aaron in no uncertain terms that because of what they did, they had both been barred from entering the promised land. Ouch. There is no record of how these men reacted, but boy, it must have been super depressing. Imagine that. They've even been wandering in the wilderness 40 years and they're about to go in. They're about to head back around again and make their approach. No, you two aren't doing it. After wandering in the desert for 40 years, and just when they are about to enter the promised land, Yahushua tells them they're not going. So the common question is, why so harsh with Mushah? Why so harsh, man? Why so harsh? Why so serious? Many theories have been proposed to explain why Yahushua issued such a harsh decree. Some say Mushah should have only struck the rock once instead of twice. Others say that Mushah losing his temper in front of the crowd was a big no-no and displayed a major character flaw that disqualified him from entering the promised land. And still others, and this is the classic reason given, say that Mushah should have only spoken to the rock and not whacked it. Which is true, because that's what he was told to do. Speak to it and not whack it. So the common excuse is probably the best one. While all of these theories are fine, they only seem to be touching the surface. So what's the real heart of the matter? In order to properly explain, let's first take a look at some of the instructions we received from Yahushua back in Leviticus. And there's one from Exodus and Deuteronomy too, I think. So let's look at the behaviour here. Let's go deeper, because Yahushua's not some harsh taskmaster. He's not a horrible asshole. He's not like that. So for him to not allow Mushah and Aaron in, after all the, think back, even back to the burning bush, after everything, lifting him up and encouraging him, and this was a special relationship. No other man in history, I dare say, has had the same relationship, particularly back in these pre-Yahushua, walking the earth shadow times. No one's ever had the same closeness or intimacy, I don't think, Mushah had. And yet Yahushua's just barred them both. So why? There must be a deeper reason, otherwise it just doesn't make sense, does it? Because Yahushua doesn't overreact, so they must have done something. Let's look at a few texts from Leviticus 19. Don't defile yourselves by turning to mediums or to those who consult the spirits of the dead, for I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. So talking about mediums, spirits, talking to spirits, idolatry, all that sort of thing. In Leviticus 20, men and women among you who act as mediums or who consult the spirits of the dead must be put to death by stoning, for they are guilty of a great evil. In Exodus 22, you mustn't allow a sorceress or the practice of witchcraft to live. And again in Deuteronomy 18, which we haven't got to in these videos yet, but there better not be anyone among you burning their sons or daughters as an offering, or anyone who practices divination, or tells fortunes, or interprets omens, or practices sorcery. Better not be anybody like that among you. So we can see how Yahushua feels about that spiritual, talking to spirits basically in essence, contacting the dead, which is just spirits anyway, unclean, fallen spirits, that's who you're actually talking to. How does Yahushua feel about it? And people who have made it an occupation or a trade, or go by the term of a sorcerer or a diviner, a medium. How does Yahushua feel about that? Put them to death. That's a big no-no. So before we go into this next bit, let me explain something to you that we don't often grasp, because we've all been brought up, most of us, in a westernized culture where we just assume that there's only, whether we've been brought up in Christianity or Judaism or, most of the major, even Islam, most of the major religions believe they're monotheistic. There's only one Elohim, there's only one God, there's only one creator of the universe, and that's it. And, it all goes from there. But there's only one, So, but that's not how Eastern cultures and Middle Eastern cultures react or feel or believe. They don't believe that. They weren't raised in that. It's just common knowledge to them that there's lots and lots of deities, lots of gods. And even when Yahushua introduced himself to them through Mushah, they just tacked him on. They just tacked him on to the list. And yeah, they made him the best one, but there was still lots and lots of others. You've got to remember that. Even back from Abraham, he wasn't shocked when he went to Canaan at all the idolatry and everything. It would have been second nature to him. That's what he came out of. Ever since Noah's Ark, a few hundred years after that, when they abandoned everything Noah was teaching him, and eventually Noah died, all that came back in. All the sun worship, all the multiple deities, Nimrod, Tower of Babel, all the multiple religions and deities, all that came in, and that was in the earth. Abraham came out of that pagan culture. It was second nature to him. It wasn't a shock to him. He probably still believed, even after he'd met Yahushua. And we dealt with that with Yitzhak and Yaakov, particularly Yaakov. They all believed that the Elohims were territorial and there were multiple Elohims. And, just because we've now met one face to face, and he's talking to me and everything like that, I'll believe him because he's shown me these signs and wonders, and Abraham had a special relationship with Yahushua, and it was great. Mushah talked to him through the burning bush, great. It's possible, it's probably, it's 100% possible. These people still believed that there were multiple, lots and lots of deities. Why am I telling you this? Because that was their go-to. That was their, okay, they still exist, but I'm not allowed to talk to them anymore. It wasn't a case of, there are no other deities. There's only one. I am Yahuwah. Worship no one but, okay, so we're not allowed to worship any of them anymore. But they still exist. That's what they think. They're still there. They still existed, but Yahuwah is just too jealous to let us, worship him. Worship them. So, do you see what I'm saying? In these people's mind, it was just common knowledge that there were lots and lots of deities. And so Yahushua was constantly bringing them out of it, saying, you're not going to worship me like that. Even when they were using his name, they were worshiping the same way. He hates it. Hates all this blending and mixing. So I'm telling you this because this is the audience that Mushah was talking to. This is the audience. So while we might look at it and go, well, this is so stupid. Why are they still worshiping? Because that was their go-to. What are the things in our life that we've come out of? Things that we might, look at or see or have been in, and things that, while we know that they're not acceptable in Yahushua's eyes and we may not do them anymore, they don't bother us. They're not a shock, horror, because we came out of them. Like how many times you walk past a restaurant, particularly in the morning, and you smell bacon and eggs. Oh, and all the memories flood back. Oh, I remember those bacon and eggs. Remember the eggs Benedict and the bacon and egg rolls with barbecue sauce. Remember all that? And you have fond memories of it. You don't think it's an abomination, do you? You think of, oh, wonderful. Of course, you wouldn't do it because Yahushua hates it. It's not food. You don't eat pigs. But that might be a bad example. But you see how to us, that's not a big deal. We don't do it because we don't do it. But it's not a horrible thing to us. We think of it and we think, oh, remember the taste of this crispy bacon. And some people feel like that about seafood. They love all that stuff, And so my point is, Yisrael, this is second nature to them. They weren't monotheistic. They believed in lots and lots of deities. And even when they were told they're not allowed to, they still believed it, but they just put Yahushua above all the others. So let's break this rant and go into this. There's a big problem with the rock situation. Remember I just told you, read all those scriptures about talking to unclean spirits, being a medium or consulting spirits of the dead. Do not let anyone among you burn their sons or daughters. None of that pagan. He hates all that stuff. Even though that was their second nature, he hated it. Remember Yahushua told the man who was collecting firewood on the Shabbat, stone him because he's on his way to possibly sacrifice his child. That's what I believe. To a child sacrifice, Not only was he burning fire on the Shabbat, but it was to child sacrifice. So he was dead, put to death. So here's the problem. Here's the big problem with the rock situation. Instead of simply trusting Yahushua and speaking to the rock, which would ultimately allow Yahushua to show his wonders in Egyptian plague-like fashion. Remember Egyptian plague-like fashion where Mushah would just raise up his arm or, say this or say that and it would happen. Yahushua proved that he was with this man by this man's obedience to what he said. He'd say it and Yahushua would follow it up and do it. The plagues would come. So this is what Yahushua wanted to see constantly. Mushah, instead of doing that, Mushah and Aaron took the people's behavior incredibly personal and abused them. Then they took credit for the water coming forth from the rock, and by doing so had validated the pagan belief that it was men who had control over the deities and could get them to do their bidding. In other words, Mushah and Aaron had unintentionally, I don't believe they did this on purpose, I think they were just so freaking angry and fed up with these people, but they had unintentionally made themselves out to be sorcerers. Because what is a sorcerer? A sorcerer has a power over a certain deity because they know its name and they use its name, so therefore they have the power over it. They can wield it and manipulate it to do their desires. So by Mushah and Aaron's behavior of not only disobeying Yahushua by just standing there and speaking, but going out there and centering it on themselves and their anger and what they have to do and put up with, and then bashing the crap out of this rock, You know, they had unintentionally made themselves out to be sorcerers. How does Yahusha feel about sorcerers up here? I mean, that's pretty harsh to say about our mate Mushah, isn't it? It's a pretty harsh thing to declare about him after everything he's done. But we're talking about behaviours, remember? And these behaviours were common knowledge to them because it was from Egypt. This was just normal to them. Sorcerers and witchcraft and divination was normal. It was normal, as evil as it was was normal to them. So remember, at this stage in Hebrew history, Israel was still very much Egyptian in their thinking, believing in magic, witchcraft and sorcerers, who through their incantations could wield supernatural power to accomplish miracles. Mushah and Aaron were in a perfect position to give full esteem and credit to Yahusha, but instead snubbed him, saying to the crowd, "Must we spoon feed you water?" Instead of saying, "Must he spoon feed you water?" Must he spoon feed you water? They said, "Must we, all the way home." They were making themselves out to be sorcerers and taking on the prerogatives that only belong to Yahusha alone. And because of their behaviour, the set-apartness and esteem that should have been given to Yahusha, the set-apartness and esteem, we're talking about dimensional things now, the set-apartness and esteem that should have been given to Yahusha became muddled in the minds of the spectators, kind of like flirting with idolatry. And if this was truly the case, I mean, this isn't written in the text, but when you look at the behaviours, it's very feasible. I think it's true, you know, because look at what went down. If this was truly the case, then Yahusha actually went easy on them, didn't he? By only barring them from the promised land because they should be dead. Probably because they didn't do it intentionally. They were just so fed up with these people and their constant bitching, whinging and complaining. So, remember the text up here says, in Yahusha's words, oh, it's way up here. He says, "You couldn't even trust or believe me enough to set me apart." Set me apart. Meaning I'm above and beyond and away from all this rabble. Even you guys, I'm above all that. But you've put yourself on my level so that you're set apart now too, apparently. And you're like me and you're going to do this miracle and I've just got to back you up. You're roping me into your behaviour instead of setting me apart the way I should be, you know, and must be set apart. In other words, you centered everything on yourself instead of giving me the credit. So, what did we read? If this was really the case, Yahusha went easy on them, didn't he? Because they should be dead. But they didn't do it intentionally. But you can see, unintentional or not, how our behaviours can get us into a bind. There's Mushah with his pasty white skin. I thought that was a good picture, that. Good water. Good artist rendition. To be fair, Mushah and Aaron weren't committing idolatry in terms of actually worshipping other deities. They had just misrepresented themselves and how their relationship with Yahusha functioned. They had misrepresented themselves and how their relationship with Yahusha functioned, which is something that even Yahusha never did while on this earth. Which is why I believe the whole idea of him talking to the Father, giving credit, giving esteem, praying to the Father, all these things to the Father, to the Father, to the Father, was not bipolar disease or anything like that. He wasn't talking to himself, even though, yes, he is the Father and the Son. It was the fact that he was displaying, he was perfect, remember, and he is our example. He was displaying to us how we should behave. Because even Yahusha never did this. He never misrepresented himself. Yahusha never did this while on the earth. He always gave credit to the Father. So Yahusha wanted to make clear to Mushah and Aaron and the whole congregation of Israel that he stood alone and that he was one, that he was distinct, and that there was no other being like him. like he said at the burning bush, I'm not stooping down to, if I go there, what should I call you? Who should I say sent me? I'm not one of your pathetic little deities. I won't be compared to your pantheon of madness. Forget it. I'll be who I damn well want to be. I'll be who I am, I'll be who I'll be, and you go and do what you're told, like I'm not one of the other deities, even though to the people he was. No, he's above and beyond all that. They're all made of wood and clay and stone and gold and silver and ridiculous things. He is the creator of the universe. So the problem with Mushah and Aaron was that they were attempting to show themselves as separate, distinct, and apart from Yisrael too, lifting themselves up above them, trying to show that they themselves possessed divine powers that were reserved for Yahushua alone. Mushah misrepresented Yahushua. He misrepresented Yahushua through his blazing temper and behaviour, and it would have come across as though he didn't really care for these people, and that the whole situation was a huge inconvenience and bother to him. Compare, guys. How is our behaviour at times? Do we treat people as though Yahushua would treat them? Or do we treat them as though they are a huge, throbbing pain in our ass? Even the ones closest to us, husbands, wives, children, how do we treat them? Do we have the tenderness, compassion, softness, gentleness with them? Because that's how Yahushua would be if he was in the room. Or do we take their behaviour personally? Do we get fired up and angry and fed up and give ourselves the right to, let them know that they're a pain, Because children aren't stupid. No people are stupid. Husbands, wives, everybody. They can see your behaviour. Have you put yourself on some kind of pedestal that you are some person who is used by Yahushua, and treating people unkindly? Look at this behaviour, guys. This is Mushah we're talking about, the mighty Mushah. And he was banned from the promised land because of his behaviour. Our behaviour within these living tabernacles, let's bring this close to home. Our behaviour within these living tabernacles, which houses the portal of his presence, can both represent or misrepresent Yahushua. We can represent, or misrepresent Yahushua, affecting the way others around us feel and possibly allowing them to assume that Yahushua indeed feels or behaves that way too. If people think that you can hear from Yahushua, even though they can too, but if they're immature, or if they have a relationship with you and they know that Yahushua speaks to you and you do things and you've helped them in many ways, and you suddenly have behaviours that aren't kind, they might misrepresent that and think that Yahushua doesn't love them. And they might think that Yahushua is like that. They might walk away and the demons might get them. Yeah, see, you're nothing, you're nobody. See, nobody loves you. Even Yahushua doesn't love you. All from something you might have said or done or just behaved. A look you might have given them. Can you see how we have the immense responsibility as the living tabernacle? That's why we're going through these patterns. How important was it to erect the tabernacle, put it down, all the furniture, everything? How important was it to treat the tabernacle with such reverence and behave properly around it and inside it? We have that burden on us now, the immense responsibility and pleasure of taking this and being able to represent Yahushua or misrepresent him. How does he feel about people misrepresenting him? What do you see in all the religions around the world? It's all crumbling because they are misrepresenting any scripture-based religion, group, church, synagogue, congregation, movement that is not behaving as Yahushua would, is misrepresenting him, because people automatically, that's why I wouldn't go out and start witnessing, because the minute people realize that your foundation is the scripture, oh, you're one of those religious, because people have an opinion in the world about scriptures because of what all the religions have done to it. That's the reputation scripture has. So in order to give the scriptures a good reputation, you have to shut your mouth and show a different kind of behavior, Yahushua's behavior. Because a lot of the time it wasn't what Yahushua said, and he knew the scriptures back to front, inside out. It was what he did with them. It's how he behaved them, So Our behaviours within these living tabernacles can both represent or misrepresent Yahushua, affecting the way others around us feel and possibly allowing them to assume that Yahushua indeed feels or behaves that way too. Can you see and understand more fully why he is training his bride in his fruits of loving kindness? He wants to live through her, have her represent him truthfully, and essentially become one with her. Have you ever considered that the way you behave is how your family thinks Yahushua behaves? Have you ever considered that the way you behave is how your family thinks Yahushua behaves? Yeah, have you ever thought that? Is your representation of him accurate? How does Yahushua feel about your complaints? How does Yahushua feel about your complaints? How about your temper tantrums at your kids and your spouse, etc., etc., etc.? But I have the right to, because I'm not talking about how they behave. I'm not talking about them, because they're either children or they're, immature in the belief, or they may not know Yahushua as well as you know them. I'm not talking about, even if they do know Yahushua and they're not doing it, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about me. My responsibility with my portal, which Yahushua has opened up within me. Your portal, which Yahushua has opened up within you. You can't you can't change, I should say. You can't change anybody else's behavior. Only your own. So, this was very interesting. What does open mean in Hebrew? What do you think of when you think open? I think open portal doorway. I think open connection with Yahushua's throne room. That's what I think when I hear about open. What does open mean in Hebrew? Badak, to gap open, used only as a denominator, to mend a breach. To mend a breach, that's interesting. To repair, to mend a breach and repair. What did Yahushua do? He mended the breach, he bridged the gap, he mended the connection. The connection was wrecked, he bridged that gap. Anyway, what does breach mean? Alienation. Breach means alienation. So when the dimensions were severed and the portal in the garden was boarded up, and the swords, flaming swords and everything, there was alienation. Adam and Ḥawwa were alienated, alone. By implication, enmity, a breach of promise and occasion. That's what happened in the garden. That's what's been happening ever since. Yahushua opens a portal, mankind spits on it, and it closes, and there's a breach. The connection is, the connection's dead, severed. There's a breach. Many people, and the result of that, is alienation, enmity with Yahushua. Many people are in a state of alienation because of their behavior. Alienation just means you're alone, isolated, by yourself. Many people are in a state of alienation because of their behavior. They can't understand what is happening to them. And in Psalms, David said, "Open my eyes that I might see wonders from your Torah." Open my eyes. What's the word up the top there? This all came from this. Open your eyes. Open your freaking eyeballs to see the wonders of his Torah. He's asking, pleading with Yahushua. This is David. Open my eyes that I might see the wonders from your instruction. Yeah? People enter a state of alienation and confusion because their foundational mindset, that's another meaning of alienation, confusion. Who's the author of confusion? People enter a state of alienation and confusion because their foundational mindset is built on worldly information, which is like drinking a toxic poison with no antidote. Filter this through all we've read about Mushah and how he's banged the rock twice and gone off at Yisrael. Yisrael's still inside themselves believing in deities, lots of different deities, which is worldly information, worldliness. It's the information that the world teaches, not Yahushua's instruction. And this is the result. Worldly behavior rejects Messiah, who shed his blood to set us free from our evil behavior. ignoring the word of Messiah. So Yahushua's blood sets us free from our evil behaviour. Have you faced that you're evil? Ignoring the word of Messiah, that's what we get delivered from, isn't it? Evil. It's not a pleasant experience. The evil is being sucked out of you daily, burnt, a big soldering iron, it hurts. Anyway, ignoring the word of Messiah and refusing to be obedient to his instructions. In other words, living a worldly mindset. Living this way will separate us from the Father of all creation, who really loves us. Living this way will separate us from the Father of all creation who loves us. Once you have met him and experienced his love, nothing from this world will satisfy you. Are you at that place yet? Nothing from this world will satisfy you. Sex, drugs, alcohol, rock and roll, anything you want to do, jump off a cliff, base jumping, skydiving, anything you want to get your thrills and get your jollies from, it doesn't work. A couple of seconds of a high and nothing. Nothing will satisfy you. This flesh, this carcass is insatiable, never satisfied. Yahushua wants to mend and heal the breach that has confused and alienated us from him. He came to show us how we can have him inside of us, so he will be with us every day and every night. No more loneliness, no more confusion, no more hurting, only love and peace. This is why he set up the tabernacle. This is why he said to Mushah, let the people know, in other words, let the people know I'm still here and I will provide the water for them. Just speak to the rock and water will come out and they'll give esteem to me. No, Mushah had to get in the way because he was furious, fed up with what he'd had to put up with for the last 40 years too. So the human element, the worldly mindset got in the way. The rights he thought he'd given himself as the leader of Israel. And all Yahushua wanted to do, all through the wilderness, all through scripture actually, through his tabernacles and temples, was to let people know that they don't have to be loneliness. No more loneliness, I'm here. No more confusion. I'll tell you what the truth is, you won't be confused. No more hurting, only love and peace. This is his promise and we can trust his words. Changing our minds to realize the things we thought were right and wrong are not so. What do we have to do? Change your mind and realize that the things we thought were right and wrong are not so. To drop the worldly mindset is going to hurt very much, but this journey will show us what is true, and he will open our eyes to see wonders from his Torah. Have you experienced this already? He opens our eyes. So only his word becomes the only real thing in our life that satisfies us, You will no longer just see what you see in front of you, but you will see and understand what Messiah sees and lives. Because you're looking at things through his eyes, communicating with him, and he's inside us and taking over bit by bit his time and space within us. So we become more like him. We see things through his eyes. There are many people all over the world taking this journey. So don't let yourself miss out. Look what your worldly mindset has already done to your sanity. You will never be loved the way Messiah loves. There are so many wondrous journeys in his word. There are. I can vouch for that myself, just the last year or so, going on this journey. Can you see now that Mushah's behaviour, even though despite the relationship he had with Yahushua, Mushah's behaviour was punished. Yahushua forgave him and loved him, and they probably had lots of wonderful chats and intimacy, but his punishment was that he wasn't allowed into the promised land. So that would have been a big thorn in his side, a big upsetment to him after everything that he set out to do and the intention of his heart, I believe, but just through wicked behaviour, centering on himself, centering the narrative on him instead of centering on Yahushua. How many times a day do you talk about yourself? Are you listening in on other people's conversations? Looking desperately to jump in there and say, what about me? I did that. You're trying to bring up me, I. instead of bringing all the attention to Yahushua. Yahushua did that. Yahushua did this. Isn't that amazing? I heard that from Yahushua, you know. So it worked. It must have been him, you know. So bringing attention to him instead of centering on yourself, because by centering on ourselves, you know, the self is idolatry, because this humanistic, we can do this ourselves, we can do it, we don't need any creator, we don't need it. Humanism was birthed, well, it was birthed before the Tower of Babel, but it came into flourish at the Tower of Babel. We're going to make a name for ourselves, and this. It was the original ground zero. It was the beginning of idolatry, pagan idolatry, in a full established religious form in Babel. So, and now it's come into the world, and even those who say they're not religious, they still focus on themselves, which is the number one character trait of Satan himself. Lifting himself up, thinking he has the right to be in the I am just as good as Elohim. I will sit in the throne of Elohim, thinking he is Elohim, and this. He is just as good as Elohim, he thinks. So he has the right to rule over himself and be who he wants to be, behave how he wants to behave, and he doesn't have a body, so he has to find people, and all these spirits have to find people, poor suck up patsies to behave their depravity through. And that's you and I, unless we say stop, unless we say no and ignore them. Actually, just ignore them and do what Yahushua says to do. Can you see, by focusing on yourself, you're worshipping Satan? And what's the result? You have no fellowship, you have no intimacy with Yahushua. You are in isolation, alienation. There's no love, there's no intimacy, there's no peace. And that's what the enemy wants. So through Mushah's behavior, he was encouraging the crowd to just go back to their idolatrous, oh look, Mushah's got power over Elohim now. You know, no, not true. So that's where we're at today with the behavior. I hope you can see this comes close to home. If you're not letting everybody have it, and you know, you're just taking what they say personally and getting angry, so hard to shut your mouth, isn't it? Shut your ear gates and not listen to those thoughts, even if it's the truth. Not listen to the negativity about certain people, places, things, people in your business, you know, clients, children, stepchildren, wives, stepwives, ex-wives, all sorts of wives, all sorts of people, all sorts of spouses, everything, all the people in our life. Spirits are coming at you from everywhere, at you all day, every day, trying to stop you. And how you behave makes a world of difference. Yeah? How you behave either centers on Yahushua, even by saying nothing. Either centers on Yahushua, and if they don't want to go there, they'll get whacked. Or it centers on yourself. Don't you behave like that to me, because I'm this and I'm that. I. Whenever you start talking about yourself and the I, Yahushua's going to start whacking you now, because I've told you, you can't plead ignorance. So that was good. That I enjoyed going through all that. I had no idea. I thought Yahushua was just being a bit harsh there. But no, these guys were lifting themselves up and unintentionally behaving like, you know, sorcerers. You know, conjuring Yahushua's will to come forth. So don't be like that. Don't listen to Satan. Don't listen to his minions. Come out. Open my eyes that I might see wonders from your Torah. If you're feeling attacked, if you're feeling anything, just go to Yahushua. That's what the portal is for. That's what his word is for. To uplift and encourage us and train us and wash our minds clean. Love you guys. See you later.